freight automation. One of the common problems that we've seen is a sales order gets created by, the sales team, and then before they create the shipment, a lot of times you're required, for example, for certain customers like Walmart or USDA, you want to make sure that the freight is your responsibility. So you've got to create the freight PO before you create the shipment and send it out. But sometimes, the freight team can forget to do that. So in this process, we kind of put a lot of fail safes so that people, the logistics teams will not forget it, or it will basically prevent them from shipping a product if the freight PO doesn't exist. So let me show you how that works here. So for example, the first thing we did is in the customer cards, we created this field. So for example, here's Walmart. We created this field called requires freight PO, right? So for example, if you have a Walmart, you're responsible, Walmart or USDA in Slut's case, you are responsible for, for the freight. So there's always going to be a freight PO. Whereas like maybe there's another customer that they do tolling only or something like that. They send their own truck. So you're not responsible for that. So we have a field, and now you can basically set it at the customer level. Now let's actually see how that works. So say, for example, you have a Walmart sales order. So I'm going to go to the sales order, and let's just say that we have this Walmart sales order, and we know at this particular point of time in this Walmart sales order, there's also another field called freight PO number. And if that field is empty, that means that the freight PO has not been created yet. So if somebody tries to basically just create a warehouse shipment, it will say that, hey, it'll basically say, hey, you cannot create a warehouse shipment because Walmart requires a freight PO, but the sales header does not have the freight PO. So now at least the logistics team will basically say, oh, I got to create a freight PO. We even, this we have this easy function to create a freight PO for this particular sales order. So if you create the freight PO here, you select the transportation company, and let's just say that the freight is like $10, and you create the purchase order. Essentially, what that is doing is that is creating the freight purchase order, and it basically puts all the nice fields. You will see that here's the freight PO, and it will put the outbound freight charge item, and it'll put everything, and it'll also put the original sales order's external document number or the customer PO number as a reference for later checking. So once this is done, even in the sales order, we created this freight PO number. So that freight PO number is actually here. So it's a very clear visual indicator to the freight operators that, oh, okay, the freight PO is definitely there. So now it will create the warehouse shipment without any obstruction. So you go through the rest of the process for shipping. So I'm just going ahead and shipping this particular item here. So I'm just going to go ahead and select 32 to ship over here. And when I do the posted shipment over here, the other thing I did is that, for example, here is the posted sales shipment. And if I go to the document, even in the posted sales shipment document, I have an information about the freight PO number, both at the sales shipment line header level and the line level. And this is really going to help us not only do certain automation, but even like if you want to very quickly ask, like, what was the freight PO number associated with the sales shipment line, you're able to get that answer. Let me show you how we're using that automation. So if I go back to the sales order, let's say, for example, now the sales order has been shipped, we're going to go ahead and invoice the customer so that we can get paid early. And then now 2 days later, the freight broker will send you the invoice. So let's go back to the purchase order. And we know that this is the freight PO number. And let's just say that the freight vendor basically send the invoice number, and the invoice number is whatever that number is. So at this point of time, one of the common pain points for Kathy or somebody in the accounts payable is, going into the line and then item charge assignment, and going and getting the shipment lines and going and searching, hey, what is that order and all that kind of stuff. And that's always taken a lot of time. So instead, we now have this convenience function called So if I go to the manage over here, there's a convenience function called select outbound shipment lines. What that will do is it'll basically go and look at all the sales shipment lines for which this is the freight PO for, and it'll automatically get all those sales shipment lines into here. And let me show you what I mean. So once I select that and I go back into the item charge assignment, it automatically pulls the right sales shipment lines directly into the PO. And this has always taken like at least 5 to 10 minutes every single time. And it's also very error prone because sometimes you assign the wrong freight PO to the wrong sales shipment lines, and that really messes up the COGs. But this is a lot more automated way of doing that. So essentially, that is the function that we added. So like this, if you go to manage, the select outbound shipment lines will automatically add those lines over here. Okay. So now it becomes a lot easier to go ahead and post the invoice and not miss, like not, mess up the assignment of the sales shipment to the right freight PO. Stop recording. George.